This is something I've wanted to address for a while, and I figure I might as well just do it. So I'll do it, and then I might try to do some ranked CV later or something. This is from this is a CV rework thing. Community contributors were invited to Russia. They came in, they got to hear kind of, what are the concepts, what are the ideas, what's going on behind the scenes, what's happening, with all this. And, whoa, try to shrink that down a bit. Let's try to figure out, so they're presenting. Now, before we go into this happened. There was patch 8.0, and this might be gone over in the video, but I'm going to go ahead and do this real quick. There was patch 8.4, patch 8.5, and then there were patches into the future. I think there was... I don't remember which one of these. So, just for knowledge's sake, this was the AA change. We're gonna make that all like big. This change made it so all of the AA damage that was dealt to planes goes to the last plane first. So all of this damage gets channeled to this until it's dead, then gets channeled to this until it's dead, then gets channeled to this, then it's dead, etc. Prior to this, it was distributed randomly across the multitude of planes, so you could bullet sponge. You could take tons of damage. It might take 2,000 damage to kill a plane, but that 2,000 damage would be sprinkled across 6 planes, or 9 planes, or 12 planes, so it just wouldn't result in any kills. So there's like no plane loss ribbons at all. So patch 8.5 was like, this was the change, man. Plane loss became extreme because old AA values used to be almost twice what they are today. Patch 8.4, I think, was a speed alteration. I think. So, I think that was patch 8.4, and they'll probably go through this. And then patch 8.3, I think there was a reticle change. And what that did was you'd have like a friendly bomb reticle or something. And this reticle would have, a targeting reticle. Well, if you put an enemy DD in the center, most of the bombs would drop in the center and this dude just be dead. So they changed that so that majority of the bombs will fall on the outside, with some of them falling in the middle because they disperse inward from the outside. So it's almost like the center of the reticle is actually this outer portion, as opposed to the center of the reticle literally being the center of the reticle. But there's also a lot of space here, so I mean you could try to aim with the edge of the reticle and just miss if it goes elsewhere. Alright, so I'm going to play this. I'm going to play it potentially at a faster than slow speed, but we're literally just going to go through this, and I might stop it, because one of the issues that I've seen with how people have watched this before is that they'll watch it, and they'll hear the words that the devs are saying. But there's two things you have to remember. One is they're non-native English speakers, so there's going to be some mistranslation. And two, you might hear something that sounds... Sometimes you have to translate engineer. My mother was an engineer. She programmed, etc. And there were literally people that would be between the engineering teams and the folks that are ordering the software, or the folks that are, doing the business side of it. Like, they'd have a translator, almost. And to an extent, when you're speaking game dev, sometimes you need a little bit of a translator, which can seem a little strange, but it is what it is. So I'm going to run this, and we're going to kind of react to it, and so I'll have a video on this in case this comes up again, because honestly, this is referenced so often that I think it just has to be addressed.
Great topic, just something about organization. So unfortunately, because of traffic jams and other factors, and you having a lot of fun yesterday, we're starting a bit later, so please pay attention to your schedule, because it obviously will be shifted because of this, and follow your curators. Probably will have to cut a bit some parts like lunch, coffee breaks, and let's try to squeeze everything. So we're going to talk about a very interesting topic. This presentation is embargoed, so you can film, take pictures, and share it with the community after embargo date. And obviously, we couldn't conduct this summit without CV rework discussion, obviously. We're going to keep it pretty serious, but I decided that we need proper presentation title, something like this. And this is the all shit posting we have in the presentation mostly. The rest will be serious. So again, we are going to be your speakers today with Ivan. Ivan will have some interesting insight, and we'll have Q&A after the presentation. So if you have any questions, just write them down, and after we're done, we'll be able to address them. The structure of our talk will be this. So first of all, we need to look back a bit, the boring part, and remember why we actually did the CV rework in the first place. We also will look at the data, the spreadsheet, because it's still relevant and important. We also think about what was done wrong, especially with the launch of CV rework, and try to understand, to learn some lessons from it. And of course, we'll talk about favorite Flambus topic, data versus feedback, data versus experience, data versus fields, and we'll try to understand what's important and where. And yeah, Q&A. Yeah, I actually did the slides with a lot of text, so you can take pictures. It's just more convenient for you. I'll comment on some points anyways. So why did we do CV rework? Why did we dive into this big challenge with a lot of resources, money? Why do you spend so much time doing this in the first place? Obviously, the class had very low popularity, and it was really detached from the main game. It was a completely different genre. We all know it was RTS. And the problem with the audience was that, yeah, having RTS inside action was a good idea on paper, and we were like fans of this idea ourselves. But with time, we understood that basically the skills you have for other classes, they do not really work for CVs, like for the most of the audience, and the detachment is just too way big. Like it's about, our game is mostly about positioning, evaluating the map and your surroundings, and obviously RTS, unlike slow shooter, RTS requires a lot of APM, a lot of parallel actions, and so on and so forth. And well, because of low popularity, we all had the situation where you just took defensive AA on Cruiser instead of Hydra, and then you couldn't see a CV in like 5 matches. You wasted your consumable choice. You also could invest some points in captain skills and modernization and still didn't see any carrier. And then, of course, as long as you think, okay, I'm going to switch to Hydra and do different build, you go to the match and you have like a midway coming after you. It's very nice. So it's inconsistent presence of the class in battle like leads to this failures in the player's choice of builds. As for skill gap, like I want to be really clear here, we do not want to remove skill gap. Skill gap is important. We want good players to do good and bad players to do bad, but the point is, the question is how much difference should be and how it should influence the experience of all other players. So for instance, if a carrier player does really bad in battle because he's bad, it's okay, but if it leads to the huge disadvantage for his team from the start, this is not so good. And combined with all of these problems, we had really excessive battle influence, like carriers often were decisive in many cases. We also saw that in serious competitive environment, people just spec to A a lot, and like loss of carrier could really snowball the match. I don't say that it doesn't happen now and it doesn't happen with other classes, but it was excessive in our opinion.
So just to kind of look at this and sort of recap what he said, why are they reworking it? Detachment from main gate experience, low class popularity. If you think about a free-to-play game, the wider your net, the more people you're going to get. So if you have RTS and you've got a platformer and you've got this and you got that, you got all these different things covered, well, theoretically, there's a little piece for everybody. So in a way, that's good because you can draw on a lot of population to play your game. That's cool. But if a lot of people are coming in and they're playing surface ships and they try, oh, this is different, and then they don't try it anymore, how do they learn it? How do they interact with it? If the majority of your game is based on this immersive camera over the shoulder, camera over the ship kind of thing, and then you have something that's just legit different, how many of your camera over the shoulder of the ship people are going to talk to other folks and go like, oh yeah, man, it's a great RTS? Nobody, because they don't play it that way. So this is one of the things that's going to jump out to them. A lot of skills obtained in other classes were irrelevant on carrier and vice versa. Legit very different. So you might be an experienced surface ship player that just none of your skills translate over. Might be an experienced CV and very little of your skills translate over. We still have that to an extent, but mostly in terms of risk and positioning. A very new CV player will learn how to attack things, but not necessarily how to position, what engagements to take, what things to do. That's something that you learn through trial and effort. And surface ships are frankly much more risk intense than carrier play. Although I do actually think carrier play is a good way to learn about the game because it is such a low risk experience. You get to have an experience and kind of learn what the game plays out like. Very different set of physical requirements for playing CV. This is something I've harped on a lot. Namely, there are some people that multitask, and technically there was a study done that says no people actually multitask. All they do is they start a task, they stop it. They go over, they start this task, they stop it. They go over, they start this task, they stop it. And they're able to manage multiple tasks, but it's only by stopping and starting them individually. No person can actually split their mind into multiple frames or multiple directions and simply juggle 6 puppets at once. They're actually just juggling 6 different programs by addressing this one, then addressing this one, then addressing this very, very quickly. That actually has a physical requirement. There are people that, well, frankly, most people don't do that, which by its very nature, because of the physical requirement, is going to limit the player base in their ability to interact. At least in a game like StarCraft or other real-time strategies, you'll have people that will find their skill level and stay there. And there is skill-based matchmaking or some form of ranking system where you can find other people that are roughly at your skill level and you can play games against them. But with the random situation that this game is providing, you don't have control over that. Now that could be an argument for skill-based matchmaker, but still, like, the physical requirements literally mean that you're taking a section of your populace and just, nope, they're not going to work for this. Evaluation of your surroundings and direct control versus APM and intense multitasking. Very different skill set. Low value of AA builds, he mentioned that. Sucks if you bring an AA build, there's no CV. So theoretically, if AA is an offered thing or it's a part of your ship, they want you to have carrier interactions. They want you to have planes that you can shoot down and planes that will threaten you so that the AA section of the ship matters in terms of ship balancing, in terms of ship presence, in terms of teamwork. Like, this is supposed to be part of the game, and if there's just no carriers to really interact with, well, that's going to be an issue. So this does actually go toward the popularity argument that people have pulled from this, but there's a lot more, which is why I'm kind of going through this list. Skill dependency and gap, high demand for micromanagement, all or nothing AA mechanics. And this is something that I've highlighted multiple times. Now, I will say I was just corrected in my Discord that one of the videos that I saw was a Jingles video where iChase, a very capable CV player, went over to a battleship and killed it. And then he went back, he reloaded, he went over to the next battleship, and he killed it. Just 100 to 0, dead. What that means is if you've got the golden gun, one bullet, you're dead. Well, then you have to have the golden armor. You have to have something that can prevent you from dying in one shot. So the AA mechanics had to be extremely strong because otherwise you just literally, I'm dead, gone. And then the next person, I'm dead. Like, you have to have some kind of damn near immunity shield to be able to stop the incredible, onslaught of what's coming in. You have to stop the avalanche. High alpha and fighter gameplay. Personally, I didn't get to experience that, so I don't have that. But that would come down to skill, and I'm pretty sure what that means is some people could use fighters to simply sweep away the enemy CV and make them irrelevant for the rest of the game, in which case one team has a CV, the other one does not. Even if the hull is still there, it's not doing anything. And the difference between a good CV player and a bad CV player was frankly just too much. And then excessive battle influence. They're going to go into this more in depth, and I think this is actually one of the least remembered sections of this summit, or at least remembered and most misunderstood. So we're going to try and kind of talk about that, but I do believe that's coming up soon.
So let's go into spreadsheet a bit. First of all is popularity. So I have just some 3 numbers for you here. It's amount of unique weekly players with at least 1 battle on CV. Just to be clear, it's not class popularity. We'll go to class popularity later. It's amount of players who actually played the carriers. And we see that the numbers spiked to 30%, which means that 30% of our audience, contrary to 15 before rework, actually started playing carriers on the release, which is understandable because it was a completely new design, completely new gameplay, and people were hyped. Now, by now I mean like last month, basically, it stabilized at 22% of the audience. So now at least quarter of our players, from time to time at least, they play the class.
So this is important for a few reasons. People with at least 1 battle in a CV, if you're not using the carrier, you have no idea what the carrier can do. You have no idea what aspect it's bringing to the gameplay, other than you see planes attacking you while you're in a surface ship. Having a well-rounded, fully informed experience is important. So what does the spreadsheet say? Before the rework, 15% of players even touched them. That's pretty low percent. If knowledge is gained by the experience of playing them, well, those 15% are going to disseminate out that knowledge so far. So X amount of your player base is going to actually get some kind of something from that 15%. The release came out, absolutely not surprising, the numbers spike. Why? Because everybody's talking about the new thing. You're going to have people that are downloading the game to try the new thing. You're going to have people in the game trying the new thing. It spikes, and when they say now, it's around 22%. So more people are experiencing this, which means more people are able to kind of disseminate the experience to others. Just gives you more breach into the population that is talking about your game, playing your game, dealing with your game.
But what about popularity of the class itself? This is a chart basically of class popularity. It's amount of battles on each class of the ship. I have a pointer here. Well, these are the carriers. This is rework, obviously. These are destroyers. You can see that they're correlated, of course. And yeah, this is the general trend from December 18 to July, well, June and July in the future of 19. You can see the picture, but what's interesting here is Asia. The whole world, Asia. Asians. So we have some ideas of why it happens, but we don't have any like complete.
Before we go on, I just want to point out. So we're looking at a spreadsheet. If we look back a bit, it's general. This is talking about Asia. Asia has a much higher uptick in carrier population, a big drop in battleships. Probably battleship players took to the CV play, because I think if I've understood Asia correctly, there is a lot of long-range engagements until people are softened up that they move in. So that would make sense that battleship play might move to a long-range engagement style that's more accurate. DD play dropping, honestly, carriers were very strong against destroyers, especially when they were initially released. This is not at all surprising. This will be addressed further as things go along. But some people, in the past years, the spreadsheet has become a meme. But there's only so much that you can balance off of your gut and from feelings. You can listen to people that rage in the forum, you can listen to people that tell you you're doing the best job that you've ever done. But realistically, the amount of people that interact with the forum or even give you any form of feedback in the first place is about 3 to 6%. Maybe up to 10% on a good day, but it's not a huge amount. So if you want to get the most accurate amount of data from a situation or from the player base or from your game is legit pull information from your game. So this isn't a question of a poll. This isn't a bunch of people on a forum or on Reddit just kind of like clicking the upvote button or saying, I played Battleship, but now I play this. This is legit. This change happened. How many people willingly chose what they were picking? What is the makeup of the matches now? What are the difference that we're actually seeing legit in the game and charting it out? Because you have to have some kind of information to make decisions on. It's, well, I make more money now. I should have more money. Well, are you spending more money? Are you losing more money to gain more money? How are you investing the money? How has rent gone up? What's the rest of the situation? Well, that's what this is. This is basically some detective work, pulling data from the game, trying to figure out, okay, we did a thing, so what happened? Well, that's what this is. This is trying to figure out what happened.
Understanding, we have some hypothesis. Because of Japanese carriers, or because of the audience on Asia tends to be younger, and this class is more appealing for younger audience. We have some theories, but for now it's just under investigation. What's important here for us is that we cannot balance the game for each server independently. We have one game experience. We have cross-server clan wars. And while balancing carriers, we need to take into account all servers. For example, this was the reason it was so hard for us. It was one of the reasons it was so hard for us to introduce cap on carrier numbers. The cap, which would perfectly work on Russian server, on North American server, it would just completely destroy matchmaking queue for Asia. But now it's stabilizing, and as you know, we're introducing even more caps in this update.
Yeah, I don't remember what they did with 8.5, but I mean, they were pulling back on the triple carrier stuff, because when the rework first happened and you see this giant spike in popularity, there were 3 carrier games. That's 3 carriers on both sides. But again, listening to what he's saying, they're trying to look and they're trying to figure out, what does this mean? There's actually a job in the game design industry called data analyst. And to be honest, I'm sure there's that job in damn near every field that exists right now, because data is like one of the new gold mining currencies. People try to get data so that they can understand customers better, they can understand human drives and human interactions better, so that they can tailor products, advertising interactions to specific audiences with just precision. So what they're trying to do here is literally, we have this data, they're trying to formulate theories, they're trying to figure out, they make hypothesis. Is this the issue? Let's guess, is this the thing? We try to sift through and find it. Because one of the issues with having data is you can justify almost anything that you put in front of yourself if you have enough data to draw from, because you'll find some fact or some purpose or something that will justify your point. So it's not about trying to tell yourself you're right. It's about trying to tell you, or trying to learn, what the patterns are in the data and draw the best information from it that you can.
You have any comments here, Ivan? Okay. Different implementation of what? Of Matchmaker? We're not fans of doing this per region, because we strongly believe, we unify everything across the regions. We unified back in I think 2 years ago, we unified premium shop and discounts. We unified rank battles progression, and our philosophy is that the rules of the game should be the same for everyone. So we really don't want to pursue different matchmaking, and this is why we were waiting for this to drop. And then we introduced a soft cap for carriers in tier 10, and then we're introducing for tier 8, basically in the 0 at 5. So yeah, no separate matchmaking here. So another metrics I want to discuss is class retention. Some of you probably know what it means, but I'll try to explain it to you anyways, just in case. So I'll compare the retention of old CV, which will be end of 2018, and new CV, which will be last several exciting months we had. And we took all players with no prior CV battles or players who just didn't play the game for 1+ month. So basically, it's CV newbies for us. We built weekly charts. I'll just explain you how to read them. So retention for week 1 is always 100%, like 100% of these players played a carrier week 1. Then we look at week 2. What percentage of players still played at least one carrier battle on week 2? And then we can, like, the more data we have, the better picture we have on this. Basically, class retention shows the chances of player sticking with the class after he or she starts to play it.
Okay, so why are we even looking at class retention? What's the purpose of this? Legit, you can ask people, did you enjoy your experience? Yeah, no. The best way, like, what's the easiest way to know if somebody enjoyed a ship? They play it again. What's the best way to know if somebody enjoyed eating in a restaurant? They went back and ordered more food. What's the best way to know that that girl you went out with the last week likes you? She calls you back. That's what class retention is. This is if somebody tries a thing, are they continuing to play it? And if you actually have an amount of people that are in fact continuing to play it, well, that's cool. Okay, so did we make the class in a way that it's enjoyable, that people are engaged, that people want to continue? Yes, no. That is what this is trying to pull. One of the things that this is not going to be telling you is how fun and engaging the experience is from the surface ship against the CV. That's not what this metric is for. This is purely, did the reworked CV come out in a way where people want to play it? And they're about to show, I guess, what they found after looking at this amount of data.
The chances of player sticking with the class after he or she starts to play it. This is the chart of NA, an example. And basically we have, like, blue one is new carriers. We can see that although the first weeks are more or less the same, we have better retention here for the whole lifetime. But this chart is not easy to read because, as I said, week 1 is always 100%. So it's kind of, the scale is not very convenient. So I made this table for you with difference. This is worldwide difference per week. So as we see, we have some like issues here on week 3 and 4. Generally, it's slightly worse, but the whole picture is pretty good. I also want to comment on servers again. So the best CV retention is on Asia, surprise, but the worst is on CIS. So we have some regional discrepancies here. And basically, while all servers have positive trend of players sticking with CVs, Russian server is the server where CVs are the least popular and players are least excited to play them. And of course, we need to keep on researching this. So now we have like 6-ish months after rework, right? But we should remember that we had very dramatic changes, especially during the first couple of months. So obviously we need to revisit this chart each month and check out the new data is accumulated. For example, we're nerfing, effectively we're nerfing carriers in 0.85 with DPS change, and this will affect player retention. We need to check it in 1 month, 2 months, and so on and so forth.
So you just want to point out something you said, we'll need to check it in 1 month, 2 months, etc. From everything that I've seen, wargaming tends to implement a change and the community may explode. We hate this. Fuck you. You know, this game is dead. Whatever. They don't tend to take just 1 week's worth of time analyzing what's going on. They tend to take a month or 2 months or 3 months. Let it filter in. Let people start to see what happens. Let people interact with it. And if they find that it's just an extremely negative thing, they tend to act. If they don't, if it's, well, this is kind of borderline, we'll see how it plays out. There's 3 ways to interpret feedback, because that's one of the common things is, you know, our feedback says this is terrible. Why don't you listen to our feedback and fix it? Well, there's direct feedback. There's actual feedback, like how people are playing the game. You can pull data directly from that. And then there's kind of your own instinct. You know, sometimes the data can show you that everything is working out, but you still have people that are just really upset. So if you can find out why they're upset you can, okay, so the thing is working. It's just that the way that it's working isn't working out in this. So maybe we can tweak this or something. So you'll have some kind of niche alterations or tweaks or something, but even unless it's something just egregiously problematic, like game-breakingly bad, you're probably going to see 1, 2, 3 weeks, maybe 1, 2, 3 months worth of time before they're going to start looking to enact changes, because they're going to want to make sure that if they're going to do something, that they have enough basis to do it, that they've kind of done their homework to make sure that what they're doing is addressing the issue, not addressing the outcry. But as far as class retention here, there was extreme amounts of fluctuation in terms of balance for the first many months. That's actually the reason why carriers are not in COTS, is because they were so aggressively being balanced this way and that the players in COTS just decided we don't want to deal with this because we have to plan around stuff that we don't even know what they're going to do in a month from now. How the hell do we make plans for this? So COTS went, okay, we're going to remove carriers for now because they're definitely in a state of flux, and carriers have stayed out of King of the Seas, and my assumption is they will stay out of King of the Seas because they've just kind of become their own little thing. But when he's talking about 8.5 is going to hit, and then they're going to have to spend 2 or 3 months just trying to see, because the AA change in 8.5 was a giant kick in the nuts. I can't really even describe what an average player probably experienced when going through it. They probably thought, oh my god, how is this even playable, and just completely stopped. So I would love to see what the class retention is post 8.5, but they've never released those numbers. This is all way back in 2019 when they're just about 5, maybe 6 months into the rework, trying to figure this shit out as they go.
Skill gap. So it's really a challenging thing to evaluate the skill gap, and there are probably many ways to do it, but what we tried to do is we took all the player base by percentile and tried to project several battle metrics on it. I'll show you some charts here. So x-axis will be player percentile. What you need to understand here is that to the left there will be like worst players, to the right there will be the best players. And then we will look at some stats. The data we took is tier 10 ships from October, November 18 and May, June 19. And we took May, June, again, because for the first few months of CV rework, we did a lot of dramatic changes, and this is why the statistics is very volatile. Now we have more or less stable periods, so we took it to check out. And yeah, you should pay attention to more to the general trend, because, for example, if we have top 10% of players, there are few of them, and their like charts will be very volatile just because there are very, very, very little data in there. So, win rate, average win rate. New carriers, old carriers. So
I mean, right off the jump, and he's probably about to say this, if you were inexperienced in an older carrier, you got fucking stomped. If you were excellent in an older carrier, you performed even higher. So newer carriers did pull up the low lows, did shrink the high highs. At least this is 5 to 6 months into the rework. Obviously, people that have been playing this for now 2.5 years are going to be at a completely different experience level than what they were 5 to 6 months in. Would love to see updated numbers, but unfortunately, this summit is so often misquoted and misrepresented that I don't know if they'll ever do this shit again, which kind of sucks. But I mean, it's cool to have the information from when they did put it out and to kind of try to look at it.
So what's to see here? The angles. Old carriers, basically.
Wait, am I reading this correctly? Is that 0, 1, 2? Old CV on the really low end of the performance spectrum was as low as like 18-17%. Holy shit. 17% win rate. Oh my god. And then on the low end of the newer style is at 28. Oof. So looking kind of in the middle, the bulk of the players is going to be somewhere about 43 up to maybe 50-ish. So 43 to 50-ish, and then when you're starting to get into the higher percentile, it starts to move up. So this was capping at around 65% back then. Higher capable CVs right now can pull about 65 to 75 with outliers. I know of a CV that can have a solo win rate of up to 80%, but literally that's one person that exists in the world. I haven't met others. So I would say that's an outlier. Most people tend to be in the 65 to 70 something percent. So this has changed as people have learned more. But I guess it really just kind of moved to where it used to be. The question is where this is now. But I don't know.
Worse players played even worse. Good players played even better. So it's like right now we have worse players having better win rate on average. And we kind of nerfed the very, very best players in terms of results. And I will show you it with comparison to other classes a bit later for more perspective. But what about absolute damage? It's just a nerf across the board. All types of players, good players, bad players, they started to deal less absolute damage on average. And frags. Death by 1,000 cuts, right? But still, old carriers, new carriers. Decrease across the board. Spotting damage. Not that significant, unfortunately, yet, but still. Across the board, less spotting damage.
I do want to say, one of the things that people are talking about now, so carriers have existed in this newer state for a little over 2 years. Their damage, their plane health, their AA interactions, flak interactions, all kinds of stuff have been adjusted. And people would just generically say CVs are broken, CVs are OP, CVs are this, CVs are that, etc. It does actually seem like in a lot of the feedback that's being given or the stuff that I'm seeing on the forums, the damage is no longer as scary as it used to be. People are now focusing on, oh, carrier's OP because of spotting, because of spotting, because of spotting, because of spotting, because of spotting. Like that's the main thing that people are harping on when they say CVs are broken. Spotting, spotting, spotting. And I want you to understand that he said yet. There are multiple parts in this video where they address spotting, but I think it's in the Q&A phase, which we're going to hear later, that they're going to say something like, right now we're focusing on this, because if we focus on, 4 or 5 different things at once and stuff changes, how do we know what changed and why? Whereas, if you're a little kid doing a science experiment on how much does the plant grow depending on how much water you give it, well, then you put the plant in the same spot and you give it a little water, you give it a little more water, you give it a lot of water. You don't move the plant to different spots with different amount of sunlight, with different heats and colds and variants. And when you start changing lots and lots of things at the same time, how do you know what that water is actually changing? Because there are too many variables. So if they're working on influence or they're working on damage, they have to stay on influence and damage until they've really finalized that and figured, okay, this section is workable. This section is where it needs to be. Now we can move to that. So I would not be surprised at all if they get to a point where they think the carrier damage interaction or plane to damage interaction or AA interactions, whatever, are fine. If they were going to move to spotting, that would probably be the next sense of iterations down the road, 6 months, year, 2 years from now, whatever. So I just want to highlight that he said yet. And some people are very like, well, it's been months, it's been years, where the hell is it? Sometimes it takes a while to get the shit right. And this entire company does not live to balance carriers. They're bringing out new ship lines, they're addressing new events, new interactions, new things. It's a work in process. Free-to-play games are very often going to be balanced on the fly through updates and iterations. It's a perfectly normal thing.
And let's check out it with comparison with other classes. Win rate, skill gap with all other classes pre-rework. What's interesting here is that this is cruisers, battleships, and destroyers win rate distribution, and it looks like one line. All classes are more or less in harmony here. But carriers, old carriers, as you can see, bad players just really, really did bad compared to other classes, and good players outperform. That kind of means that if you really want to bump your statistics and win rate, you should have learned to play old carriers, because being a good player, you can have better win rate on old carriers than one. It's just the best. It was the best class to pumping up your stats. But what about now? We don't have a lot of huge amount of battles here, so this chart is a bit volatile, but still, as you can see, it just mostly follows all other classes here. I think it's really important to highlight. So we have win rate gaps here.
So I'm just going to reiterate this. So right now where this line was 65-ish%, this has probably moved up to 70 to 72 with 75% outliers. And remember, this is the extreme high end. This is the super unicum that is just like dark effing purple. These are the people that you probably know by name, even though they're in different continents of the different world, if you're really big on paying attention to this scene. This is the Stratmanias, the Gaishus, the Warlords, the Ahscances. I said it. These are the people that are going to stand out as the stuff that really define where this end curve goes. Eraser, who was mentioned, because he was the guy at 80, it's like literally this is 10, 20, 40, 50 people. When you start to move back, you get maybe here on the graph, this is starting to be off a few hundred people. This is starting to be like maybe almost 1,000 people back here. Like the way the skill distribution is, you have to remember this is an extremely small amount of numbers starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of population. And while this currently looks like it's lower and higher skill players are the ones that are more likely to be pulling that 50% something win rate, over the last 2 years, you could probably assume this is bumped up a bit and that these are more even. A lot of people will say, or at least I've heard many times, well, carriers can get 75-80% solo win rate and surface ships only do 65 to 70. I mean, you can literally see right here, even back in the day, 70% is perfectly attainable in surface ships. There are many people that do it, but when I say many, this is going to be tens or hundreds of people, not thousands, not tens of thousands, not millions. Like hundreds or thousands of people are going to live in this little area here, and that's it across the face of the earth.
I think it's really important to highlight. So we have win rate gap after rework being more or less in harmony with all other classes. Pre-rework, it was really different. Also, we can see that damage, frags, spotting damage dropped across the board for all players. And yeah, just to reiterate on this, tier 10, we measured this because tier 10 is always on top. It's the pinnacle of CV power. It's a very good benchmark. But of course, we'll be looking at other tiers and trying to balance it out for all tiers in the game.
Okay, so somebody asking chat, why is the slope flat in the middle? So one of the things when they're doing all this is a presentation they're putting out before an audience, and they haven't stipulated what are all the factors that they're using to assume skill. So it could be that if there's like 10 different skill metrics, some people might be very skilled in here but less skilled in there, and as these start to pick up and these start to go down, you're going to have kind of like a balance, a wedge, because we don't know what internal data they're using for these metrics. Although I guess in this case it's win rate, but the question is, how do you rate the skill of the player? There's been multiple calls for skill-based matchmaker, which there's positives and there's negatives to it. One of the negatives is once you reach your skill level, every single game you have to try hard if you want to win half of the time. There are a lot of people that just want to play. And in that case, having to try hard might be frustrating, and it can drive people off. They just want to be able to play and just have an experience. So it seems that Wargaming has chosen to pull away from the skill-based matchmaking, although they've recently added the ranked queue, which is almost always on. So if you want to find people that are at varying levels of tryhardness, you have varying leagues that you can go into. Theoretically, people that are going to try harder are going to go up to the higher leagues, although some people, it seems, just play it to grind it out. But as for why is this flat, I don't know. But it's probably because of various data points that just happen to merge around this area, resulting in a 50-ish% win rate.
Here, I think it's really important to highlight. So we have win rate gap after rework being more or less in harmony with all other classes. Really different. Also, we can see that damage, frags, spotting damage dropped across the board for all players. And yeah, just to reiterate on this, tier 10, we measured this because tier 10 is always on top. It's the pinnacle of CV power. It's a very good benchmark. But of course, we'll be looking at other tiers and trying to balance it out for all tiers in the game. Do you have anything to add? All right. Then let's try to look at battle influence. More amazing charts here.
I'm just going to say, before he even continues, let's try to look at battle influence. They're going to be pulling data points that are going to try to give them some rough idea of basically what PR is. So if you're familiar with PR, like it's a personal score, how is PR charted? Well, let's actually let's try to do something for this. So how is PR charted? Because a lot of people are going to look at PR as a measure of somebody's relative skill. These numbers are evidently not going to be perfect, but they are representative of what PR is in general. Damage is weighted at approximately 65 to 70% of what the PR number is. Kills are going to be weighted at approximately, I think it's 20%. We'll put approximately 20%. And I guess I can move this over to make it look pretty. And then wins are approximately 15%. So what does this mean? It means that if you win, but you have no kills and low damage, your PR is only 15% of possible. That's how important winning is in terms of calculating PR. PR instead is primarily about average damage and kills, even if you don't win. Almost 80% or so of this PR number is from you dealing damage and getting the kill ribbons, as opposed to whether you win or not. So you might think, well, PR is extremely good at telling you, oh, this person's amazing, this person sucks. What PR tells you is, how good are they at doing damage? How good are they at getting kill ribbons? And can they get wins to fill onto the top? Which is actually interesting because it seems, frankly, to be very basic, but it works. Unfortunately, PR cannot calculate average XP, base XP, because I think it's like that. It can't end up equaling anything because of premium. So premium actually gives a plus 60% bonus to base XP in the way that it's recorded. So you might have somebody with an average base XP of 2,000, but because plus 60%, it's actually going to represent as like 3,200. And there's no way for the outside website to figure out which is which. So it completely ignores base XP. So some of the stuff that you're going to see here, how do they measure battle influence? Relative damage, potential damage, control points, AA, spotting, relative spotting damage. These are things that they're trying to pull from the data they have to try to figure out how much are you, or how much is a class of ship, not necessarily the player, but the class of ship, bringing to the battle and offering in terms of overall influence to the entirety of the match, which is a really big conjecture. But I mean, how can you gain conclusions from the data if you don't basically jump off that cliff and say, we're going to look at this, and this, and see what it tells us? Okay, does it look right? Does it feel right? Does it smell right? How about if we modify these two things and we'll take 2/3 of this and 1/3 of that, like whatever. So they've made a metric. They don't tell you exactly how the metric goes, but they've made a metric which uses this to try to give you some semblance of way to look and to have an idea how much is the class bringing to the table. And this is going to be the battle influence that they talk about. This will actually have some interesting stuff in it.
So when we just started developing the game like 5 years ago, and then we went to alpha test, we used just average metrics mostly. We had average damage, average win rate. But of course, with the evolution of the game, with resolving different balance problems, making mistakes from time to time, we tried to have more scientific and deeper approach to this. So in last year, we created cumulative metrics, which we call battle influence, What's important to understand here that this battle influence, it takes into account relative damage, potential damage, control points, A spotting, and relative spotting damage. The point of this matrix is to compare very different ships, because in our game the classes are very different. And for example, destroyer has a small amount of HP, battleship has huge amount of HP, and different ships have different priorities, different targets. And the point of this matrix is try to compare them all in terms of how they influence the battle outcome. And even if you, like, I think Ivan can tell you a bit more about methodology later if you have questions, but even if you don't agree with methodology fully, what's important to understand that this metric is applied to everyone on the same basis. And it will just look at the dynamics, please, at least. Yes, science. So, carriers, battle influence. It's what I really like to show here is dynamics. So, rework release, like drop, hot fixes, the period of instability, like what the hell is happening here? And then basically we didn't do really dramatic changes for this period of time until 084. We did some tweaks, of course, but not that dramatic. And you see that despite of not buffing carriers in any way across the board, I think we didn't do any buffs, we see that the battle influence grew. And this is a learning process of the audience. The audience basically is getting good with the carriers. And it affects, of course, you can see that destroyers are the most affected by carriers. Like they have almost mirror situations here. But what I want to highlight really a lot for you is engine boost nerf 084. A lot of people said that it was not a nerf or it was not significant, but just see how it broke the trend. It just dropped on this level, and how destroyers started to feel better immediately. Like, okay, they maybe, I don't know about destroyer players, if they felt better, but destroyers as a class in the game, it's like no denying that they got better. And this chart, of course, is not counting the latest DPS AA buff we are having right now in the game, like which happened yesterday. So we will be very interested to see how it continues to affect. And, another thing I want to highlight is that some people still think that all CV were less cancer. I just want to highlight that there is no place on this chart to see how they were before rework. It's like that, probably. Yeah, I mean, literally no place here. So their battle influence significantly dropped.
So, I mean, they're going to talk about more, but just to go over this, there's a few things that are really important when looking at this. The first off, the release. It's going to happen. Destroyers aren't going to know how to play against it. They're not going to know what's going on. Destroyers definitely take a dip. They start to learn, but as they start to acclimate, so does the CV player base. The CV player base starts to learn. They start to learn how to strike better. They start to learn how to save their resources better. They start to learn how to interact better. This is going to be the learning process. This happens for every single ship line that comes out in the game. German DDs were just released, the second branch or whatever, and initially were called garbage, terrible, awful, the worst thing that ever happened forever. And yet, there are people that have learned the ships and learned to excel in the ships that have found that they really do enjoy them. That's going to be the learning process. That tends to take weeks or months before people have really figured out, oh, I do it this way. Oh, this works that way. It's a process of uncovering the potential that lies within something that people just haven't discovered yet. And sure enough, as the CVs are going up, the DDs are starting to kind of trim down. Now, granted, this looks relatively flat, but you can see there was a nerf in 8.4 that basically CVs were very fast, so they could get across the map very quickly. They could traverse AA fairly quickly. So what they did with this engine boost nerf was to standardize how fast you could speed up and how fast you could slow down. Rocket planes speed up by 40 knots at most, slow down by 20 knots at most from the cruising speed. And strike planes speed up by 30 or reduce by 15. The only difference to this was the the IJN line, which had 40 knot increases in all of its strike types, 20 knot decreases in all of its strike types, or all of its planes. So you can see it may not have felt, and that's one of the things where data can come in very useful. CV's still OP. CV's still too much. My destroyer still got nailed. Yes. but immediately the game shows results. The cruisers are now more able to breathe because the CVs are less on their neck. Destroyers are more able to breathe because CVs are on their neck. And very quickly you see the results of that, and then it's going to level out to the point where people have now acclimated to the change. And you can see, once again, the learning process continues. Now that people have gotten kicked with a nerf, they start to figure out how to play with the nerf. But nonetheless, the nerf did actually hold, and this is still continuing. One thing that I have to remind again and again and again and again is that he just said this summit happened one day after patch 8.5 dropped. 8.5 was an earthquake in terms of what CVs could do and could not do. 8.5 gutted what was happening prior to that, to the point where they got 8.6 and then 8.7. They literally added priority sector and cut everything's AA in half. They totally altered how that all worked because of how many planes were just getting straight up bitch slapped right out of the sky. Because the old values were designed to deal with this weird random damage distribution thing, and then patch 8.5, all of that damage is funneled into a single plane and murders it. And you just see planes pop like little firecrackers right down the line against like a bunkered up Minotaur or something. So while we have this information, we don't have the information what happens from 8.5 or 8.6 or 8.7, 8.8. We don't have where this DD number is, where this CV number is. People look at this and go like, well, last time I saw it on the graph, CVOP. For all we know, DD could be up here, CV could be down here. Like, we don't know. And unfortunately, again, because of how many people have taken this summit and gone like, see, this proves it's all fucked. See how Wargaming terror, rah, rah, rah. It's unlikely that they give out this information again, which sucks. It would be amazing to know the current status of this stuff, how it's all interacting. But one other thing that has to be pointed out, there's this narrative that, well, CVs are only done this way so they're more popular. If you look at this, he's like, dude, this shit is off the map. This does not even have any relevance to what this stuff is. Old CV, in terms of all the things that it could do and the stuff that it could force in map interactions, was off the effing chart. So this pulls it in so that at least it's within shouting distance of destroyers, and that's before they've been able to nerf or corral it or move it into other respects with the other things on the chart. Now you could say, well, we don't know how they're manufacturing the data to show this influence, so how can we know that this is right? You have to at least operate on a basis of faith that they're trying to give you the information that they're using for the health and balancing of their game. So you have to assume that they're trying to do the best that they can with what they've got. You may disagree with the change, you may not like it, you may love it, but you have to assume that developers in a game that sells legit around the world, is considered a success story around the world for years running, have to at least have a semblance of a clue and are trying to do the best with what they've got. So just a few things have to point that out. Even though you may not have felt like this did a damn thing, it did. And even if you might feel that CVs were worked to make them more simple or more stupid or more popular or more whatever, old CVs were off the effing chart. They needed to be reined in somehow. That is one of the big reasons for this change.
Yeah, I mean, literally no place here. So their battle influence significantly dropped. But let's try to break it down a bit into these metrics. So here we have just relative damage. Follows the same trend, a bit more volatile, but still. As you can see, relative damage significantly dropped. And now it follows basically the battle influence. Yeah?
I'll add a bit here. As you see, all classes dropped a bit. That's because that's where the ranked season starts. And so a lot of players go into ranked, and this is only the random battles.
Yeah, it's PvP, just regular PvP random battles. And next. That's kind of not very interesting chart, not too exciting, but these are all classes but DD, relative damage taken. Like, nothing changed here. That doesn't mean that CVs are totally fine. That mostly means that CVs did not, screwed the whole game, every ship, because the average amount of damage taken is more or less the same.
So just to explain this, because I don't know if it's coming across very well, relative damage taken by the other three classes, probably from the CV. It means that our CV's only killing destroyers? No. Are CV's only killing battleships? No. Are CV's only killing cruisers? No. Are they excelling so much against one class over the others that the carrier players are naturally drawn to the easy, the easy damage, the easy food? No. In general, people are striking what is available to strike, and given, the mass amount of data of, statistics or whatever, it all falls out to the point where people are basically taking damage evenly. It's being distributed out amongst the majority of them. Now, when it says relative damage, that's most likely meaning if you take 10% off a DD, it's like taking 10% off a battleship. So in terms of relative damage taken, it's similar. Even though battleships might be taking more damage by volume, they have more damage to take, or they have more health to give. So it works out in that sense. It just means that one is not overly jumping out and screaming over the many months of this rework that like DDs are just like, they're up here, they're just getting fucking mauled, or battleships are up here, they're completely defenseless and getting ripped apart. It's just not showing.
Like, I don't know what to say here, honestly. Like, this one is just fine. And here is another interesting chart and another explanation, so bear with me, please. It's not possible, actually, to measure fun in numbers, right? We all know that. But the problem is that, as with all other games, the majority of our audience is not socializing with us. They don't even respond to the surveys. They're not interested. They just play. So if we try to measure something in numbers, what do we do? And this, I think this one we did... Oh, sorry.
Support the corporate overlords. It does suck that YouTube does a lot of this like 2 ads at a time thing, but
yep. We did to try to see how carriers influence the fun, but I'm not saying like personal fun. I'm not trying to say that if this chart is okay, then everything is great and fine. It's mostly about how to measure the effect on the audience which doesn't talk to us in any way.
So just want to point out that he legit spent about 30 seconds trying to tell his audience multiple times, we are not measuring this to tell you he had fun. is effectively what that translates out to. This is saying if people aren't answering surveys, if we don't get 50% player feedback, if we just get like 3% player feedback through surveys and responses and whatever, then how the F are we supposed to know if people are enjoying the game? Other than the fact that, well, maybe they play the game more. Well, ultimately, I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to start tracking how much time are people playing the game, how many times are they continuing to play the game after having a game experience. Because again, if you don't like a restaurant, you probably don't go back to the restaurant again. If you don't like the pizza place, you probably don't call them the next day for more pizza. Your interaction is going to guide whether you go back to the well to get more water from the well. So you can at least extrapolate off that if people are having a positive interaction, they're probably continuing to play. And I think that's what's going to be the basis for what he's talking here. Like, how successful is the experience such that you continue to experience more of the game?
Relative breakdown per hours spent between battles in hours. That means that, for example, we have bins, 1 hour, like from 0 to 1 hour, from 1 to 24 hours, 48 hours, and so on and so forth. And this is the percentage of battles played with this gap. That means that, well, in our game, you know the battle time in our game. First of all, it means that if the battle is not here, the player just stopped the session, stopped playing this evening, and went to bed, I don't know, or just rage quitted or something. And for us, as a game who wants to be healthy and wants to bring fun to people, the more battles we have in the first bin, the better, obviously. Because the less time player spends between battles, the better. Because he plays more battles in roll, he has longer sessions, and so on and so forth. So
again, supposition. If you order pizza from a pizza place, are you ordering again the next day? Are you ordering again the next day? If you order pizza from a pizza place, how long until your next order? Are you ordering again 2 weeks from now? Are you ordering again 2 months from now? Are you ordering again a day later? That's literally what this is. Distribution of time to the next arena, aka next battle. Most people are going to play almost immediately. Most people, after they finish playing, they might play within a day, and then it starts to go out a few days, a week, multiple weeks, months, whatever. And this is really just trying to track that.
This comparison is actually very interesting because it shows the relation between you scoring first in the team and last in the team. So it's the first place in the team for experience, and this is the last place, 12th place. You can see that here we have 66% of battles, and here 57%. This is basically the difference of how players react to scoring first and scoring the last. The difference between this is how many battles end after this, and then they have break of 24 hours, basically. No. Because unfortunately or not fortunately, not all people are like you, Flambas. But you know what? In 12 players team, somebody is going to score the last anyways. We all know that. So sorry, but it's not really relevant. But this is just to compare, because we can have this breakdown from different angle. And let's see this. This is the same type of breakdown, but now it depends not on your score, but on the amount of carriers in your battle. 0 carriers, 2 carriers, 4 carriers. Again, difference 62%, 62%, 62%, with some minor fluctuations. This is for all classes.
Okay, so in the prior thing, they're looking at, okay, if you have a great game, what's the likelihood you play another game? If you have a bad game, what's the likelihood you play another game? And they try to look at those trends. Good game equals this, bad game equals this. Okay, moving on with that knowledge, if you have a game that has no carriers, 2 carriers, meaning 1 on each side, or 4 carriers, meaning 2 on each side, what is the average experience? How many do people continue to play? No carriers, 62. 1 carrier on each side, 62. 2 carriers on each side, 62. There's almost no difference between these two graphs, meaning if there were no CVs in random, people would still play the same amount as if there were 1 CV on each time in random or 2 CVs on each team in random. The play experience is not affected in terms of statistical analysis and try to look at, are people going to continue playing? Oh, no, fuck this game, I hate carriers, and they just turn off the game. The answer is no. It's not meaningfully trackable.
Again, the difference here. But let's check out the destroyers. Here we have some problem. So for destroyer, there is almost no difference. It's like 65% and 64.7 between having no carriers and 2 carriers. But 4 carriers is kind of damaging the session, and probably more players quit the session after having this amount of carriers in the game. And this is actually one of the reasons we are addressing this, and we're adding soft caps to avoid the situations where you have 4 carriers per battle. But I just want you to see the difference, that still, even here, even destroyers who suffer the most, scoring the worst place brings people more probably rage and more negative emotions than having 4 carriers in the game.
So you'll notice, you might think, well, spreadsheet says yada yada. Even this going from 64 to 63 has already told the game designers, whoa, we see something here. It doesn't have to be 64 down to 50. It doesn't have to be 64 down to 30. It doesn't have to be some massive ass trend. Legitimate. There's feedback on the forums. I feel oppressed. I'm in a DD. CVs come after me. And then they also see data. Okay, 64% here. Up, it's down to 63 something. 26.9, it's down to 25.9. Even small variances like this are going to present when trying to understand what's going on. So if you think well, it would really they wouldn't act on anything unless it was really a problem. This is how small the variance is before these guys give a shit. In short, they give a shit. is kind of the takeaway that you should be pulling from this. They notice even small variances like this and consider it something worthy of mention, worthy of notice, probably worthy of action.
Or they are just masochists who just keep playing no matter what.
I'll add a bit about the experience place. It's mostly linear. So like you see the difference between 6060 and 57. It's like 10%. You can just linearly put a line, and the like place in between will be something like 62%. So it doesn't matter if AFK or not. It's just a linear trend.
And I think this will be one of the latest charts. Not trying to say that some posts on Reddit were irrelevant, but still a lot of people said that like I'm playing just one battle per year. I used to play like 10 battles per day because the game is not fun. It's the trend of average battle per users per week and per month for the whole year. I don't have really much comment here. I just have this Christmas tree because here's a spike. And we have this spike every year because every year we have great tradition of introducing a lot of activities on Christmas, a lot of grinding, and of course player activity goes up. Also, it kind of corresponds with weather in most of our regions because when it's summer, people prefer to have a walk more. When it's winter, they play the game more. But still.
Yeah, so all this really is the game is dying. Nah, people still playing the game. Well, I'm not playing the game anymore. That's cool. People still playing the game. Well, all my friends aren't playing the game anymore. That's cool. People still playing the game. So if the introduction of carriers just drastically everything's gone, everything's different, everything's terrible. This is where carriers were introduced. People still playing the game. So yes, there can be an outcry. Yes, there can be a lot of news or backlash or feedback or screaming or theorizing or whatever. But you have to understand, these guys are making a game to be played. They're not making a game as like an ego statement. They're not making something so they can say, hey, cool, I made this. This is the job. You know, if you are manufacturing widgets to be sold at Walmart, you need to keep a steady supply of widgets manufactured and sold at Walmart. That is your job. Their job is to keep people playing the game so that people consume the game and people consume from the game, i.e. buying ships, spending money on events, doing things. So they absolutely have to give a shit about this. And if the introduction of carriers, you saw this number start to tank, that threatens the health and safety of this game. That is not the case. Now, granted, they introduced something which was, well, rather new. So before you may have had more of a flat line, and how you see more variance. They introduced a new aspect to the game. There's going to be differences. People are going to respond to a different, like a pretty major variance in the game. So this is not at all unexpected, but it's not trending down. It's trending average. So that's actually a really worthy data point, because if you saw this going down, that would be like, warning, how the fuck do we avert this? We do not want this number to go down, and that's not what you're seeing.
It's just stable trend, and nothing really changed here. So, to finally be done with spreadsheet part, it's just some conclusions here. So we have popularity and retention got better. We have shorter skill gap, although there's still something to work on. We have dramatic drop in CV battle influence compared to other classes. We see that destroyers do have problems, of course, because they are influenced the most by carriers, and on a lot of charts we can see like mirror situation where something gets better for carriers, the same gets worse for destroyers, obviously. On the scale of the game, sorry to say that, guys, but we did not ruin it, because ruining the game means this goes down, and so on and so forth. In terms of the whole game, I'm not saying about fun and personal experience at the moment. We didn't ruin it. However, I want to talk now about what did we really do wrong, and what do we need to do now.
So I want you to understand, they literally just said, we could have done this better. and we're about to tell you how we think we could have done it better. They're going to have a Q&A later on in the session where you could probably ask questions and tell them how they could do it better. But this is not to assume that these guys are like, ha, we're amazing, everything's perfect, we didn't fuck it up. Like, legit, this whole section of time, this like 20 minutes worth of production or presentation, God knows it's probably 40 to 50 minutes because I talk so damn much. But this whole section of time is about telling you, we put them out, we're tracking what they're doing, we see that there are differences, we've started to address those differences. Now, they haven't gone into all the specific things that they've done, but they have shown you how they're tracking the influence of what a carrier can do and monitoring how having carriers in the game is interacting with other people that are playing other classes. They want to make sure that other people in other classes are still playing the game, regardless of if a carrier is in the game or not. They want to make sure that they're having, as good or relative time to carriers being included, carriers not being included. That's important to them. They looked at the influence that the carrier is providing. We literally saw, what did the speed nerf do? It made destroyers breathe a little easier. It made cruisers breathe a little easier. It didn't much change anything for battleships, but it pulled a little pressure off. So that, if nothing else, tells you the direction that they're going. Were they going in a direction that made carriers more oppressive? No. They were going in a direction that made carriers less oppressive to try to bring the other people up so that they could get into a more relative position. Now, again, I have to point out, this is from 2019. This is almost 2-something years ago, which is a long-ass time. I have argued many times that I feel carriers are balanced. Does it mean they're perfect? No, but I think they're balanced. You can have a fully playable game, be it in a high-end game or a random game or a ranked game or whatever, and it's still enjoyable. Well, what if the CV feels oppressive? Well, fuck, so do radar cruisers sometime. When I'm in a Yugamo being shadowed by another fucking destroyer that won't leave me alone, I'm feeling pretty oppressed because I don't have the guns to fight this bitch off. But that player is going to take their advantage and use it against me, and I have to respond to it, even though sometimes that just means tucking my tail between my legs and running the fuck away. Same thing if a destroyer is hunting a battleship. These are things where you're going to be put in a situation as a player where you may not be having the greatest, most happiest, fantastic time on Earth, but the game itself works okay. And that's the core point that the game designers are aiming for. They want to make sure the game is playable and that it works for everybody so that they can go in, have a game, enjoy the game, play another game. So they're going to talk about, I guess, what they consider to be recent mistakes.
So, first of all, let's remember some history. The mistakes of launching the CV rework and beta test. This may not seem important for you, maybe because you don't...
This is not related to the video. Somebody in chat was saying, so if CVs are balanced, why are they banned from all competitions? So Doc Beach, you probably weren't here, but CVs went through a lot of iterations between patch 8.0 and probably about patch 8.8. They kind of calmed down around patch 8.7. But COTS played with the new carrier version. And then when they were going into the next season of COTS, because there's two COTS games per year or whatever, the players were upset. Like, hey, how the fuck do we plan around something that's getting a new balance update every single patch? How do we figure out how this all works and stabilizes in a meta if we're going to try to compete at our top level when we don't know what is coming around the corner? And the COTS admins went, well, that does make sense. Okay, we won't have carriers this time around, and we'll see, we'll bring them back when people feel like we can. So they played without carriers. The reaction was pretty positive. And when they went back to the player base, okay, so it seems like the balance patches have stalled now, or stopped. Do you want to bring them back in? And most players said, no, we just prefer the surface ship gameplay. Well, COTS had always had carriers before, but if people enjoy this, fuck it. So they stuck with that, and they've continued to stay with that to this day. Will that be the way that it is in the future? Will they add a different form of competition that has subs as well as CVs? That remains to be in the future. But the reason why carriers are not in COTS is because of the fluctuating balance and the players deciding to pull them out because of that, and then it was just easier to keep them out. People enjoyed the tactics or whatever that occur because of it, and that's just the way that it's played now.
Have this perspective like of developers, and you don't know what we had to work on, but this is just our experience with the rework launch. So first of all, we launched the beta test with a lot of stability issues. It was really bad from our side, and this meant that for the first few iterations of beta test, when we already let the critical mass of people in, we had to concentrate on fixing the bugs instead of tweaking the gameplay, which is really bad because people were expecting us to tweak the gameplay from the start to try to do something on their feedback, but we had to spend several versions just by fixing the technical stuff, which was not really a wise decision.
So just want to point out what he's saying. They announced, hey, cool, we got carriers, and they put them out on PTS. Hey, look, it's a beta. Everybody can take fun. And as much as they could have tried to use that for gameplay balancing, they didn't get that opportunity because the client was buggy. Client might have crashed, things might have broken, stuff didn't perform correctly. So all of that gameplay balance feedback that they could have tried to zone in on, they couldn't use because you're taking programmer time trying to unfuck up the game, trying to fix all the bugs so that the game doesn't just crash randomly, screw up this thing, not work over here. So unfortunately, like he's saying, they had their big influx of players when they announced it and people gave it a shot, and then that big influx of players went away. Shit. So they eventually get the bugs worked out, but how are they going to get the players to come back and retest it? Well, the answer is they're not. So they're going to end up going where, I guess we'll just have to balance this on live servers, which had the fun reaction that it did.
We also had heavy balance changing with very high frequency afterwards because we didn't have much time according to our plans, and like we had to do many changes, and not all people had time to apprehend them and give us feedback. And one of the biggest problems I think was that after beta test, CV rework was just released. If you remember, I talked about it yesterday on my NDA presentation. I cannot name, but I mentioned this, that the majority of game changed overnight for most people because most people didn't visit the beta test. They came, they see completely different experience. They see some interesting things like Hakiru scoring like 400k damage. Wow. And I still think that despite of our efforts, we didn't give enough informational support. We didn't give enough explanation on how new mechanics work. We should do better in his.
So big stuff with this is, if you look forward from this, they have not been this way with subs. They've had long periods of time between testing events with subs. They've had testing events with subs on live server. They had a sub battle, I think, probably, 6 to 9 months ago. They're going to have subs in ranked, which if people want to play ranked, they're going to be forced into an environment with subs. They could just choose not to play ranked, but it gives people an incentive because they want steel or they want rewards. So they'll have interactions with subs. So rather than just like, hey, guess what? Everything changed. Have fun. They're taking multiple different interactions to try to get the word out, to get people to experience the shit, and to slowly work it into the game instead of this gigantic culture shock, which is what they had with this. They unfortunately squandered their attempt at getting actual human bodies in the game to be able to give them balancing feedback because they had bugs, it wasn't ready. And then when they did put it onto live server, they hadn't given enough time for people to acclimate to the difference, so it's just like, bah, holy shit, everything's different now, what? Which evidently was very shocking.
Then I want to comment a bit on the factor of balancing on live. No one really likes balancing on live, except us, maybe. Why? Unfortunately, we don't know the way how to recreate proper player behavior on beta test and on public test. Unfortunately, many tweaks can be done only on live just because the amount of data and behavior of players. It's relevant, it's on topic, it gives us data to make decision. And people learn really fast. For example, slingshots, don't remember them happening on beta test, honestly. Pre-drops, no, but they appeared after rework was released, after the majority of audience started to play the CVs and explore the class. And this is what I mentioned in my Waterline video like several months ago, and it happened. And I think it's really was bad on our side that we still did not estimate properly the amount of work we had to do after the rework, because now it's past 6 months past. We hope to like be done with it completely by that time, but we're still doing some changes, and we still need to like correct the balance at some points, and you'll learn about it soon. So the evaluation was not perfect, obviously. This is just the development lesson for us. I really hope we don't get to make this huge change to the game in the nearest future. And I don't see us doing this, but whenever we need to do something that big, we probably will try to remember this lesson. So focus more on stability, let the players in smaller group, give them more time to experience these changes, focus on all classes evenly, because on CV rework beta test, it was really difficult to focus on the surface player experience, regular class player experience, because everybody just wanted to play CV, of course. And this is very interesting, I think, lesson that we should find the way, if we do such big changes, we should find the way to let the players, the whole audience, to try the new gameplay, the new features on live server without downloading some test client, without going to public test, but without changing the game. So like maybe some sandbox within the live server. I think it's technically feasible, and if we need to do it ever again, some huge change like this, we'll try to do it in this way. And yeah, just take more time and introduce content at slower pace so players have more time to react and give feedback. Later, please. I'm sorry. Let's just keep it. So, because I told you, because this is your favorite part, and I wrote it specifically for you. So I want to be really clear here. With all the spreadsheets I show you, we understand that players do not play spreadsheets, they play the game. Like, we understand it, and we play the game too. And the challenge here is to properly take emotions, feelings, and data into account. Also, I need to highlight that we're all humans, and without defining any mistakes done with CV rework, I still want to highlight that naturally all people are resistant to change. So this is the challenge. When you have the big change, you need to define, did you do right? What did you do wrong? What's the real feedback? What's emotions? Maybe it's more relevant, maybe it's less relevant. It was a big challenge, and it will be a big challenge for us, because people tend to overreact on the one hand. On the other hand, like, if a lot of people overreact, then something happens, and we need to look into this and evaluate what's wrong. So, what's next? What do we do now? In this update released like yesterday, as you know, probably we changed AA DPS.
I do want to say this. I had literally pages of back and forth on a forum over what counterplay means. Counterplay to some people means the ability to overcome and win. As in, like, if you've got two people in a fighting game, counterplay means if they use this move, you can use this move to get around it and hurt the enemy player in such a way that you can win, or you can dominate the exchange. For me, when I hear the word counterplay in game design, the way that it's used is more, if player A attempts to do something, what are your responses to that? And that could literally just be avoid, to not have the interaction. So if player A throws something at you, if the something is immediate, like a laser, as long as he aimed correctly, it hits you, you take damage, there's nothing you could do about it, other than to not be in a situation where you could throw a thing at you in the first place. Whereas counterplay would be introducing maybe a period of time, like if he's throwing an axe, the axe has a little travel time so that you could dodge to the side. You could defend yourself with a shield, you could block, you could duck, you could do something in order to have a response to the person's attempted play against you. So when he says the feeling of counterplay is underwhelming, what that to me means is if the planes are going to come over and strike you, if you're not getting any plane kills, did you contribute anything to this interaction other than, well, I got shot and that sucks? Effectively, no. You pulled some of the CV's time, you pulled some of the CV's attention, you took some of the CV's damage, but you didn't diminish the resources in any meaningful way. And outside of spending some of their time, that's kind of all you did. And CVs being a resource class, you need to have interactions with their resources. So if you're killing their resources or you're dragging them down, you're affecting the CV's ability to move forward and continue affecting the match. Unfortunately, people I think a lot of people find that killing some planes doesn't feel like it has any measurable impact. I do wish that there was something in the client that would tell you how many planes the enemy CV has, whether by a number or by some representational color. So like dark green means they have full reserves. Dark red means that they have none or like 0 to no reserves at all. So if they're completely out of rocket planes, it'd be either black or a dark red dot. Something that gives an indication that the enemy CV is bleeding resources to do what it's doing. So that you as a player can know, this person is in fact losing, taking attrition or whatever. Because you can look and see a health bar. Oh, somebody lost half their health. Okay, cool. So you at least have a measurable understanding of what they have lost in order to do what they've done. Not having that indication on a CV, I think, is actually hurtful. But when they talk about counterplay, this is not about a surface ship shoots down some planes and then happens to fire some magical missile that goes over and hits the hull for 1,000 damage. It's not about dealing damage back to the carrier just because you didn't get shot by the planes. This is about if the carrier tries to do something to you, what can you do in response? Is it you can kill the planes? Is it you can dodge the plane strike? Is it you can have some kind of interaction to protect somebody else? And that's where they're going to be going with this. So I just kind of wanted to clarify, just because there seems to be a wild variation on what people think this term means. But I think in the gaming industry, it's literally if somebody tries to do a thing to somebody else, what kind of things can they do in response to it to negate or mitigate the incoming experience, the incoming damage or whatever.
And yeah, the whole point right now that we were concentrated a lot on balancing, and this is more about feeling. What do we want to work on during the next updates? What's the biggest complaint? The feeling of counterplay, lack of counterplay. So we're designing several changes which should heavily contribute to this feeling. And the first change is already live. It's AA DPS change. Like I read Reddit. Reddit told me that planes die faster now and more consistently. That's a good thing. Also, work in progress, but hopefully next update will introduce one more DPS change to make DPS damage be applied more quicker, more frequently, which will, on the one hand, unfortunately, remove the difference, the conceptual difference between large caliber AA guns, which apply damage once per 4-5 seconds maybe, and machine guns, which is kind of a bit not too historical, but okay, we can live without it. The best thing here is that even if the plane will just dip into your long-range AA, it will start taking damage immediately. So there will be will be less inconsistency in AA. But what's the most important, I think, about counterplay is priority sector rework. We are redesigning the priority sector mechanic basically almost from the scratch. We want to empower a player with better AA, and hopefully you will be able to try this new mechanic today on the playtest. And
okay. So what's next? What's the counterplay? So 8.5 is frankly about getting plane kills. That's literally what this whole thing is about. Before, if you had 10 planes that had 2,000 health each, that's 20,000 health. If you deal 10,000 damage, and that's randomly distributed amongst all the planes, then they're all at half health. You didn't get any kills. If you did 15,000 damage, and that's randomly distributed amongst all the planes, you didn't get any kills. If you did 19,000 damage, if it was all evenly distributed amongst the planes, you didn't get any kills. So there's no resource loss with this initial version they had. It's not to say that planes didn't die. It's not to say planes couldn't die, but it was really awkward to dump shitloads of damage into the plane and just get nothing. Some people have that feeling now with the FDR because the FDR has 4,400 health per plane. So they can dump in thousands of damage in and they might not get any kill ribbons. Granted, there might be another ship that's collecting a kill ribbon here or there, but because they're not seeing massive amounts of plane death while they're pushing out massive amounts of AA, it feels weird. It feels like I'm doing a thing and nothing is happening as a result of this, and the lack of feedback is frustrating to a player. So literally, patch 0.8.5 was about giving player feedback. You're in a surface ship, you're dealing AA damage, you see planes dying. The problem with patch 8.5 is that the AA at the prior levels was tuned for that 20,000 health group of planes where you'd have to push 19,000 damage before you start seeing plane death. Well, suddenly you've got this new version where all the damage goes into a single plane. Well, when you can rapidly push 16,000 damage, that's plane. You've clocked 8 planes in that period of time, whereas before you killed none. So like, that was a pretty big difference. You come out with a group of 10 and you don't lose a plane, and then the next patch you come out with a group of 10 and you lose 8 and you drop with 2. And oh well, that's cool. How long does it take me to regen 8 planes? About 10 minutes. Son of a bitch. Well, I'll come back with some other planes. Like, it was a very different experience. So patch 8.5 made plane kills. Patch 8.6 resulted from some testing from Little White Mouse and Lurt. They found that AA guns start unloaded. So basically, Wargaming tried to go down the path of reality. Like, well, this gun shoots once every 5 seconds. This gun shoots once every 8 seconds. This gun shoots once every 1 second. And they literally tried to model all that crap in the game so that you have the most realistic usage of the AA assets or whatever. And in general, people don't give a shit. They just want their guns to shoot the bad people. So that's what they did. They got rid of the reload timings, they got rid of all that bullshit, and they just went ahead and made it so that if you show up, you'll be shot. And they changed it so that it applies damage every 1/7 of a second. No, 2/7 of a second. So you're basically shooting 3.5 times a second. So there's a constant damage tick. So there's a constant damage interaction. If the planes dip in and leave, stay in, whatever, it's constantly being updated. This might have also changed the way that they had the auras, so that long range aura now stacks with mid range and that stacks with short range. So it all gets really big. Whereas before they had like long range was long range. That's what it was. So long range could be 1,000 damage a second, mid range could be 100. If you get through the long into the mid, well, then you're not taking any damage anymore, which feels awkward. So I think they altered that in patch 8.6 as well. And then patch 8.7, after these planes getting fucking dominated, they changed the priority sector rework where they added this ability for you to do some instantaneous damage. This is effectively manual AA. Well, I want to shoot down the planes. I want to be doing that. That takes a lot of time. You know, a surface ship is busy getting shot and torped and thised and angled and that. To sit there and go like, well, I want the time to be able to just shoot at planes for a bit while you're getting shot from all this other shit. If you're in a battleship and you shoot once every 30 seconds, you probably got time for that. But if you're in like a cruiser that fires every 4 seconds, how much damage do you lose by swapping your little AA mount and pew-pew-pewing versus manual AA of look, hit a button, go back to doing what you do. So yes, is it very simple? Sure, but it's literally designed as a result of feedback. And also when they made this interaction, old priority sector could be set on a side. So you could have a Minotaur with 175% AA damage on this half of the ship, just roasting shit. If they were spec'd into it or they knew what the fuck they were doing. This got rid of that. This made it so that you have to hit the button. You can't just leave it on. There is a ramp up time, so it's not just immediate, immediate doom laser death. So that if the CV, got hit, he might turn out and bail. This was actually a significant rework, I guess, from the way he's describing it. But once this happened, it actually felt like they kind of hit the place they were looking for, and they really didn't address much else. They pulled some damage out. They added a new line, but for the most part, what they ended up doing was buffing fighters and commander skills. Other than that, there weren't really many nerfs or alterations with CVs after 8.7. This is kind of where they hit their stability state.
The whole presentation and the playtest of Priority Sector is embargo, so you can record and share it after embargo date. Few days. So we aim here. That means that if something goes terribly wrong from technical side, it may be delayed, but I don't think it's likely to be delayed more than one update. We have playable Priority Sector already right now. If the testing of it goes well, it will be integrated into 0.87 update, and it will go on public test and go live. If something happens, some critical bugs we don't have time to resolve, we take our time, resolve it, and it will go one update later. It's just like with every other feature. But this is not design. This is not like just ideas floating around. This is what we already doing, working on, and you'll be able to experience hands-on. So I am really tired of talking, so I want Ivan to tell you about the mechanics a bit, if you don't mind, Ivan. And I'll switch the slide for you. What is the new AA sector?
So, first of all, the new priority sector will not be hidden under tilde. You will be able to just, if I remember correctly, just click on the side of the ship, and then the priority sector goes up on that side. Back to mechanic. It rewards you with instant damage to the planes, which is not in any way dependent on the AA value. It will only depend on the current HP of the squadron itself. So it will just chunk some HP percent, like say 5% from the squadron, and most likely it will kill one or two planes from the full squadron. After that, it gradually boosts the EA to some.
So I'm actually going to skip this because I think he's discussing something that hadn't fully implemented, but we're 2 years into the future. People know what priority AA does now. So we're not going to gain a lot from this. And I think he does actually go into that for a little bit. So I'm going to skip that section because I don't think that's going to be something that's very interesting or useful at this time.
So these values we showed you is work in progress. And they will be balanced according to the test. But this is the biggest change coming to carrier gameplay in the nearest future. But we also have another topic about spotting because we didn't address it. So I want you to understand really clearly, if you remember this battle efficiency chart where our insignificant change to engine boost dropped the battle efficiency, battle influence so much, we don't want to nerf spotting right now because we have AA DPS improvement, next update AA DPS improvement, next update priority sector, and every change makes A stronger and more consistent. So if we nerf spotting right now in any way, by mechanics or by settings, we can just drop the carriers below everything else, which is not desirable. But still thinking for several updates ahead, we're conducting several design tests. I'm not sure, maybe we even shared some of it in DevBlock lately, but anyways, we're conducting several design tests with tweaked mechanics of spotting to see how it works, and maybe it will be needed in a few updates. We also are absolutely okay with addressing the spotting by tweaking it or by changing how it works, using some community ideas or some coming up with some new ideas, but not now. We need to get through this first and to actually see how it works, because it will have cumulative effects, and we'll see what amount of changes are needed.
So just want to point out, I mean, there's literally a section in this which talks about spotting. So as I mentioned earlier, people aren't really talking about damage so much anymore. Sometimes, but not so much. Some people talk about, well, AA is automated and I want to be able to shoot down the planes. but that's also not talked about as much as it used to be. As AA has become more consistent and effective through the introduction of new ships, which have better AA suites, although less damage. So they're trying to introduce ships which have that balanced profile of they have AA strength, but they have less strength elsewhere. As opposed to just taking the strength of everything and just making it stronger, they're actually trying to use that as kind of like an incentive point. If you play a Holland, you have the ability to dumpster some planes. Well, that intrinsically is interesting. This new Dutch cruiser line is going to have the ability to dumpster some planes. So again, that's going to be part of what it brings. It's going to have that nice AA umbrella or blanket to really try and be able to assist its fleet, as well as doing other stuff like the little airstrikey thing, or using its guns, or having its armor to take some shots off of its teammates. But as they're saying, if spotting is an issue, you can't address spotting at the same time as you address AA. Because if you address both of them and something goes wrong, which one was the problem? Now, if you address both of them and something goes right, hey, great. But realistically, what's the chance that you just happened to guess correctly and everything is perfect now? It's much easier if you kind of chisel this into place, and once you got that in place, then you can chisel something else into place and you get it to where it needs to be over time. So, were they aware of spotting? Yes, they were aware of spotting in 2019, but they've been piecing it, putting it slowly by slowly into the place that they're trying to get it. Now, I have said patch 8.7 was primarily the point where they stopped. That's not technically true. They continued after that to reduce spotting off of CVs by reducing the vision range of planes. It used to be that you could see 20 kilometers, kind of like a battleship, and then they brought it down to 19, and then 18, and then 17, and then 16. I think it's about 15 kilometers now, so you can see about as far as like a destroyer sees. Which in clan battles, not even talking about the hurricanes or the storms or whatever that they have in clan battles, but you can often not have information on the left flank because you're working on the right flank, and you just can't see what's going on the other flank to know what the situation is unless you fly over there. I don't know how much that did or did not affect spotting overall, but I remember that was a change that they worked with for a bit. And then they did more recently introduce interceptors, which is an option as a commander rework talent, which removes spotting from the fighter consumable. For surface ships, it removes surface ship spotting. So will they revisit that in the future? Maybe. It seems to be the outlier that people are talking about now. But the real question is, what is the CV class? What are the goals of the class? And if spotting is a big part of what it is, then for some extent, you're just going to have to deal with the fact that CVs spot. That's part of what they do. But again, that might be adjusted in the future. So he's going to do a conclusion.
So, conclusions. We think you may agree or disagree, but this is our logic. So CV rework was needed because part of the game didn't properly work at all.
I'm going to stop. So Doc Beach says, a lot of new ships have better AA than older ships of the same tier. That's telling. So this is going to give you something, real basic to chew on. So you got a dude in a fighting game. Here's a dude in a fighting game. We'll even give him a sword. There we go. He's got a sword. So he's going to have an attack rating. He's going to have a defense rating. He's going to have a movement rating. He's going to have speed. Maybe we'll do that with like a little lightning bolt or something. So damage, he might have like 4 or 3 units of damage. He might have 2 units of defense. He might have 3 units of movement. And this might be like a rapier or something. So he might have like 5 units of speed. So this dude's attacks are moderate damage, but they move very quickly, so he can attack in lightning fast, whatever. He doesn't take damage very well, and he can maneuver forward and backward to an extent. Versus, you've got another dude, here's like a big dude, rawr, and this dude's got like a 2-handed battle axe or something. So this guy ain't nothing to fuck with. This is a mean mother trucker. So this dude, his attack is going to end up being something like, it's a full 5, because it turns out this guy's strike power is extremely slow. He is not mobile, but his defense power is also like, this dude's like a tank. Because he's so big, fat, and slow that he's going to take a lot of damage because he's not going to be able to avoid it all. These are relative power levels of character A and character B, and this is the sum of all of that. So if you think about this in terms of like World of Warships, you might have the Wooster. Right, well, Wooster has amazing AA. Wooster, oh, its AA used to be yada yada whatever. But if you think about it, its attack is still pretty fucking great. That part still makes this interesting, even in a game with no CVs. If there are no planes for the Wooster to shoot down, the Wooster is still able to beat the shit out of other people in an enjoyable, fun fashion. Now, if you contrast that with the Dutch cruiser line or whatever, the anti-air is going to be, you know, fucking fantastic. Oh, it's amazing. It's beautiful. Love this. I wish every carrier was, or every cruiser was like this. But its attack is going to be like a 3 because the guns just aren't amazing. And it has like this airstrike thing. So if you land the airstrike, which is a skill shot, you can kind of get this up to an acceptable 4. But is it a Wooster? No, it's not. Will it ever be a Wooster? No, it won't. The Wooster might have an AA rating of either 3 or 4 in this instance, but it doesn't have a 5 because this dude has amazing fucking guns. Like, the Wooster has a kit that makes it an enjoyable ship on its own right. It doesn't need to have the God's best AA in order to make it also be useful because it has amazing DPS. Whereas when you're introducing a new ship with new power level ranges, you can design ships that have God tier AA, but have less in the terms of movement, less in terms of damage, less in terms of armor, or whatever. Maybe less in terms of healing. You can start siphoning power out of the other skills to be able to push that power into AA to make for a balanced ship experience. So that was in response to a comment in chat.
It was a huge challenge, like remaking a huge part of the game after 4 years of release and designing it from scratch. We did have really bumpy start. We did some organizational mistakes and we had a well-deserved criticism from players. But still, looking at audience, looking at the amount of battles, looking at these metrics, like we are fine like yellow dog in the burning room, but we are fine. Right now we need to concentrate on the biggest
the dog and the coffee and the burning house
issue from the community, which is contraplay and the feeling of contraplay, and this stuff will help a lot, I think. We'll see what to do what needs to be done then. With spotting, we're kind of on the fence right now. We will wait a bit to see how AA changes affect this. And finally, and again, for Flambus, spreadsheets are important, but they are not more important than player perception and feedback. We understand that, and we will keep listening to you guys to make the game better. Thank you. Let's have Q&A, but just let's keep it organized, because we're recording this, so we can share it with you after summit, so you have some footage. And each question should be in microphone, because we record the sound from microphones. So please raise your hands and we'll give you the opportunity to ask.
So at this point, I'm going to ask chat. So they have a Q&A portion, and some of the Q&A has been cited incorrectly in this video or that video or whatever. I think one of the biggest contentions was about, I think Flamu made the assertion that CVs are going to be balanced around popularity. So if the popularity goes down, then CVs will get boosted, because we want people to play CVs, even if we boost them to the point of being stupid, which I think is just, I think it's ignorant, because they literally spent like 15 or 20 minutes telling you how they're observing situations and how they're trying to apply changes and nerfs to bring this stuff in line with other things, to just go, but if like 5% of the player base just decides to stop playing them, I mean, we're just gonna like completely throw this shit out of balance. It only took us 2 years to get them there, but fuck it. Like, the lack of thought that goes into that statement is shocking. And yet, it was said and people have gripped onto it. So, I will ask chat. I've gone for almost 2 hours at this point, addressing about 45 minutes of video. Should I go through the Q&A section? Granted, this might be an additional 30 minutes worth of time. If there's 15 minutes of this, 20 minutes of this, and we're going at about half speed, then, yeah, so... Most of chat saying no so far. People just want to see gameplay. All right, so if there's a response to this where people would like me to go over the Q&A section, I can record that at a second time, maybe take this as a part 2, but I will go ahead and leave this as it is. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So hopefully this was useful. Basically, I know there's a lot of mistranslation that goes on in the Q&A section because, well, frankly, your devs are Russian. They're non-native English speakers with a bunch of people that are very fluent in English asking questions. And not only is it hard to understand what a game dev is saying in the first place, just because it's a very specialized kind of field, but when you have translation issues going as well, that's going to be even further. But I can go ahead and save this to a part 2. So, yeehaw.